Fantastic. Hello to everybody joining. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are in the world. It's good to see many people joining. We're going to wait just a few moments just while people join. While you're joining, if you could help us to understand the global reach of our event today, could you go into the chat and write where in the world you are today, and we can see how far reaching our event is. And we'll wait just a few moments before we get started for everybody to join. Wonderful, more people joining, which is brilliant to see. Good morning, good afternoon. Sorry, I think there's an error with the way my slides were sharing there. Sorry about that. Just bear with me one moment as more people join.
Somebody's saying that chat function is disabled.
Aha, okay, that's not very helpful if I'm inviting people to into the chat. Okay, just bear with me one moment while I just resolve these issues. Okay, it should be that the chat function is now fixed again. So hopefully people can enter the chat. If not, then there is a Q&A function which you can also use. So let me just amend the issue with the slides and then we can get started. Thank you very much for your patience. Hopefully everybody can see the slides now and there's no further issues. Hello to visitors to our webinar from South Africa, China, from Brussels in Belgium, and from many other places. Wonderful. We're going to make a start. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody from wherever in the world that you are joining us from. My name is Joseph Parton and I oversee recruitment for our Executive Diploma in Global Business. I'm delighted to be joined today by Professor Mari Sako, the Academic Director of this diploma. The purpose today is that to understand much better from Professor Sako the diploma itself, from its origin to how it's developed, and hopefully whether you are a prospective applicant, whether you are partway through your application, or indeed whether you have already completed your application, it should hopefully be a very helpful session for you as you consider whether to join. I thought I would start though by just offering a very brief overview of the diploma itself. This is a one-year part-time course offered by the University of Oxford. It's a master's level qualification and it's taught in 4 modules which are spread across the year. Our next cohort starts in 2023 on the 25th of January, and we're expecting a class size of around 40 students. Here is the structure of the program. The 4 modules we're very happy to announce will be in person in Oxford next year. Over the last couple of years, as Mari will mention, perhaps we have adapted the learning, as have many institutions, due to the global pandemic, but we're very delighted to announce that there will be full in-person teaching for our 4 modules next year. The first one starts in January and covers global strategy, followed by one in April, risk and reputation. Then the 3rd module, corporate diplomacy in a global context, is in June of next year. The final module in October, business challenges in emerging markets. The 4 modules are joined by 4 assessments, 3 online assessments, which are done remotely and completed in between modules, And the fourth is, you can see there, a 6,000 word final integrative assignment, which you complete after the fourth module. Upon successful completion of the diploma, we will invite you back at some point in 2024 to celebrate your graduation in the Sheldonian Theatre or another venue in Oxford. In between the modules, you complete this at your own pace in the comfort of your own country, in your home, and we anticipate it will be 5 to 8 hours per week of independent study. And so this course is designed to provide a qualification while not interrupting the career of a busy executive. So whichever stage you're at, whether today is the first time you're hearing of this diploma or whether your application is well underway, here's how you apply. You can get in touch with me, and the requirements are quite straightforward. It's all online, the application process. We'll require an updated CV, copies of your academic transcripts. We do not require, however, a GMAT exam or mark. We'll need to verify your English language level, and we'll ask you for 2 500-word essays, which you will use to validate your experience and why you'd like to join the diploma. Usually, we'll also ask for 2 references, at least 1 professional, and we'll need to see a degree or at least 5 years, at least 5 years of relevant work experience. So if you think that you meet the criteria and you would be happy to start what is hopefully a straightforward application process, which people on the call have, some of you have already navigated, then I would be very happy to help you. But let's move to the main event of the day, which is my conversation with Professor Mari Sako. Professor Sako is a Professor of Management Studies at the Side Business School. Mari's main areas of expertise include global strategy, comparative institutional analysis, outsourcing and offshoring, and professional services. At Oxford, Mari teaches on a number of our programs and has been the Academic Director of the Diploma in Global Business since its launch in 2011. So knows the program inside out and is the best placed person to advocate for its strengths and the reasons that you should join. So at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and say a very warm good afternoon to Professor Sako. Mari, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
So let's start off then with where it all began. So the diploma program launched back in 2011, which in some ways doesn't seem that long ago, in other ways perhaps does. What did you see when you started the program as the primary function of the program, and who were you hoping to see in the classroom?
Thanks, Joe. And firstly, I should say that I'm hoping this is the tail end of the lockdown when I can't see the people that I'm addressing. So I know that there's quite a few of you there from different parts of the world, and so most welcome to just interject, pose any questions or clarification as I go along as well. So obviously Joe is going to be fielding the Q&A, and don't feel that you have to wait till the end to do that. So this is the style actually that we also adopt during the classroom, where we want to have as much interactive learning as possible from each other as much as from instructors. So with that preliminary, back to the question that Joe posed, which is back in 2011. So I think I have the luxury of starting with a blank sheet of paper back in 2011. In a lot of ways, you have to, as an academic, fit into pre-existing programs. And this time around, I could actually put my head around, what was really the primary function, but also how to think about what to include and what to exclude. So I think to start with, the real aim of the program is to educate and train, current and future business executives who can be really effective in managing their operations globally. And with that sort of effectiveness, we really need people who have the logical power to be able to analyze and diagnose a situation given data, but also in many cases, judgment has to be made, with not perfect information. And that's really what distinguishes a strategist at the top as compared to people who are basically carrying out operational processes. So making a judgment is one thing, but also making other people do what they would not do otherwise. I think that's one definition of what a leader is. And to do that, I think you need not just sort of intelligence of a logical sort, but also what you might call emotional intelligence. So we do quite a bit of instruction on how to think about this in different leadership styles as well. So that's, really whether you are a business executive working for a very large organization, or alternatively, you might be a entrepreneur or an employee in a very early stage venture. I think the same thing applies to being effective in a global context where things are changing very fast in a different speed, and that's basically the primary function. But I think equally important for many of you who are quite busy on a day-to-day basis, and most people who are working full-time, I think, have that kind of pressure of having to make decisions, having to cope with the day's schedule, meeting after meeting, email, that gets built up if you don't answer it straight away. And I think the diploma, like many other programs of this sort, is providing a safe space away from the day-to-day pressure work to reflect about your personal, fulfillment and personal achievements, but also reflect on the world and how we see the world, so that we can make good use of our time in really thinking about what it is that matters and your own purpose in coming onto the program.
Wonderful, thank you. You mentioned that in that time, the world of global business has changed so much. I've officially lost count of the number of prime ministers we've had since the program launched in 2011. But can you tell us, how has the program itself changed and adapted in the face of some of these changes to global business?
Yeah, so it's 12 years since we started, and the world has indeed changed. I think, we do want to be seen to be up to date. So there are, new issues and new current affair topics that come up. Maybe sustainability is one of those, with ESG emphasis. So we do have an in-house colleague of mine, instructor, who is a sustainability expert. And, we do go through a discussion of the tragedy of commons and, consider alternative mechanism for avoiding that tragedy of commons. For those of you who are familiar with that concept, that's fine. For those of you who are not, it's really the overuse of resources without having a collective coordination around how much is an optimal level of use, whether it's to do with clean air or fishing in the sea and pollution and so on. Of course, COVID-19 has not only changed the delivery of our programs temporarily, but also thinking about topics around the impact of COVID and the role of governments around that too. And we need to kind of think about whether or not public health, therefore, at the global level, is a topic that we should continue to cover in the program. But I think taking a kind of a decade-long perspective, what's really changed, I think, is about the shift away from the, if you like, the golden age of globalization to what some people would call deglobalization. And, to put a very simplistic mind to it, I was asked, in the world of deglobalization, why do you need to teach about globalization? Why do you need to come on a global business program? Is precisely because of the direction of travel towards deglobalization, when you do have to take greater account of the implications of crossing national borders, that our program, I think, has many topics and many tools and frameworks which are, of increasing use, I think, in many different situations at the board level and down the hierarchy as well. So with that, what deglobalization actually means, though, is that the role of governments are becoming more important than before. So whilst we are a business school, I think it's really important to understand how governments make their decisions and how businesses can not only take those decisions as given, but also how to influence the government decisions as well. So corporate diplomacy, the module 3, for example, is very much about influencing government decisions. People think about lobbying as a very Western, American, European, Brussels kind of framework, but we go beyond lobbying to think about different ways of actually, contributing to shaping the business environment in which you operate. That's one of the things that we think. Many different international institutions like the World Trade Organization, for example, continues to be very important, and we teach about also how to make use of the WTO procedures to help your businesses expand globally. And there again, you need to interact with the national governments, because the membership of the WTO, as many of you do know, is actually based on governments rather than any kind of associations or private enterprises. So the program has indeed shifted, and current affairs, we really do care about that. And there are many, many different issues that arise. And I think that the last thing I'm going to say on this is that as the Edelman Trust Barometer 2022 shows, and this is a kind of annual survey of tens of thousands of leaders in the world in both public and private sectors, and a big majority of survey respondents said that CEOs should be visible in controversial policy debates and to shape those debates in a really vast range of topics, including things like climate change, inequality, the impact of technology on jobs, discrimination, immigration. This is a really tall order, but this is the societal expectations on business leaders. And if that is the case, then you ought to be able to every morning, pick up well, I guess we do the electronic version, pick up a version, the day's Financial Times or the week's Economist, and you read a headline about anything that potentially feels like something really remote from your own business operation, but then to think through the consequences of that headline on your business, and then to really quickly come to a conclusion about how to react. That's the kind of mindset that I hope we can inculcate, but also you can really cultivate during the year on your program.
Thank you. And based on the cohorts after cohorts that you've seen, what do you think are the main strengths of this diploma? I'm also going to follow this up with a question we've had. Thank you very much. And the Q&A. What do you think separates this diploma from some of the other courses which other institutions provide? What sets this diploma in global business apart?
Sure. Yeah, I think that, of course, every business school, I think, around the world would have some courses, either part-time or full-time, on global business or global business strategy. So we are one of them in a sense. But to your question, I think one way of thinking about this is that we, I think, have a real advantage in being in an Oxford environment where we are a business school embedded in a university, where we can draw on faculty who are not just economists and business school academics, but on other types of disciplines. So I can say a bit more about that, but that's kind of strength number one, I think. So it's academic rigor, but also academic rigor combined with practice insights, and practice insights coming from practitioners. So, academics are here to kind of give you tools and frameworks and ways of thinking. And if you like, simplifying a little bit, I think that, business guests that we have are there to tell you how complicated things are and not as simple. But, I think that combination of giving you some insights from academic research on the one hand, and then the practitioner business guests' insights from being on the coalface of decision making. I think that in a classroom, there's limitations of how much you can really bring forth that kind of urgency of decisions or the complexity of the nature of stakeholder management or whatever. But I think it's really good to have that combination. And then third thing I'm going to say is about you, really, the student body, the classroom. So I cannot, kind of overemphasize the importance of the kind of expertise and the knowledge that you bring to bear in the classroom as individuals. And collectively, we typically have 20 plus 25 different nationalities. in a classroom, which is amazing in a way. It's all due to work that people like you, Joe, do to just reach out, but also you guys also come to want to be part of Oxford. But that student composition with no nationality really dominating, so that we can have a truly global conversation around various issues. I think many business schools, located in the country, tend to have claims around international student body, but I think that it is accurate to say in many cases, it means that, maybe 70%, 80% of the student body come from the country where the business school is based, and, the other 20, 30% international. In our case, we're located in Oxford in the United Kingdom. British people tend to be in real minority. So we tend to every year may have, maximum, 3, 4 British nationals. And then the rest are from all parts of the world, not just the, US and other parts of Europe, but increasingly from, Latin America, and then also some nations in Africa. And then I'm really surprised, even, 10, 12 years ago, I'd have thought about having so many people from Central Asia, Central Europe, new emerging markets where international business is obviously becoming much more important. So just to summarize, I think we do, try to combine academic rigor with, practitioner insight in a truly global setting where we can have truly global conversation that gives you all kinds of insights, which I think are going to be harder if we have a much more homogeneous student body.
Wonderful. I can further validate the points around diversity. We celebrate diversity at the Side Business School, and that's evidence, I think, in the classes that we have. An insight into how the class is shaping up for 2023. Obviously, it's still to be confirmed, the final numbers, but we're looking on track at 22 different nationalities to be represented. Less than 10% of those will be UK nationals. We are very much in a minority, and all for the strength of the discussions and the classes. There are upwards of 14 different employment sectors represented in those that have applied already as well. So if you're thinking of making an application, then this is the diversity that you'll be joining, and also hopefully you'll be contributing to. I'd like to focus in a bit more on the classroom and in the class and the style of teaching. So I think we've given you, you provided a useful overview into the diploma, why it was created, what it stands for, but what can somebody expect from the mode of learning during those module weeks?
Yeah, I think the business school teaching style tends to be not kind of one-way lecturing, but much more interactive. And I don't think we're exceptionally in doing that. But it is very much about the instructor being not just an emitter of knowledge and frameworks and how to think about things, but also facilitator for a learning environment where you do learn from each other as much as from the instructor, I think. So that facilitation skill is something that all of my colleagues have, acquired through trying and testing different ways of doing that and being trained to do so. So the facilitation part, and again, going back to just sort of how important it is to have this diverse student body. So I think that, if you do come onto the program, you would be learning as much from each other as from the instructors, right? And that may feel a little bit strange in some parts of the world, but that's exactly what's happening. And that's exactly what's happened, throughout the program. Now, on kind of thinking about, what kind of people you might encounter during the course. Maybe I could go into that as well, because that's really part of the learning environment. So you do have access not just to, me, but of course, my immediate colleagues. So let me tell you a little bit about my immediate colleagues within the business school, who will be core teachers on the program. And I think it's really important that these, are people with expertise in certain areas, and by areas I mean certain regional expertise. So I have colleagues who are a China expert who speaks fluent Chinese and understands the ins and outs of thinking the government and the Communist Party in a really, fine-grained way. I also have a colleague who is an India expert, another colleague who's a Latin American expert. So those are kind of regional expertise. I'm Japanese, by the way, so I have used to teach about Japan, and it does come up from time to time, but not in a big way these days. The attention shifted to other parts of the world. But area also in terms of topics. So one of my colleagues, as I mentioned already, is a sustainability expert. Another colleague is very much an expert on thinking about innovation and technology in an emerging economy context. And then another colleague is very much looking at public-private partnerships and thinking about state capacity in that context for delivering services which are normally thought to be public services like education and healthcare. So that's the within business school expertise. But you may also want to know about who I bring in terms of people from outside the business school, but within the business school. So we have somebody who actually used to be in the political science department. He's a political theorist turned leadership coach who will take you through how to think about leadership styles. We also used to, although we don't do it anymore, have an anthropologist who came to tell us about culture, and I've taken over that role, so we'll do some exercises in how to think about national cultures. And then there's obviously a lot of economics input in terms of trade economics and thinking about international trade friction through the eyes of economists, but in a way that's relevant to business as well. And then, I should also just mention again the guest speakers. They are integral part of the program, and I've had some business guest speakers who have been doing this since the beginning, so it would be the 13th time that they'll do it if you are going to come on the program in 2023. And one of them, one of my favorite, is a business executive who used to work for one of the fast-moving consumer products company, and he's actually a protagonist in one of the cases that we'll go through. So you'll obviously have a chance to converse with him and to really understand the ins and outs of how it felt like in the heat of the moment, kind of making really difficult decisions around the people, actually, in this case. We also have a lawyer, and actually lawyers seem to come onto the program quite a bit for all kinds of reasons. I think we always had a kind of legal contingent, so if you're a lawyer, you're not going to be alone, and we'll have speakers who are going to be lawyers as well. And this one used to be a general counsel and now kind of entrepreneur who is in the diamond business, and he'll tell you about how stakeholder engagement works in Southern Africa from his entrepreneurial perspective as well. So
wonderful. Thank you very much. We've had a very good question coming through the Q&A function. If you're listening and you have a question that you would like me to ask Professor Sako, please type it into the Q&A function, and we'll find time to ask. This question is about the emphasis on Oxford thinking and Oxford doing, the notion of purposeful impact. We mentioned this in a lot of our marketing and on our website. It's a very important part of the diploma. Could you expand on what it means by purposeful impact in a modern business or organizational context? How do you understand that?
Okay, that's actually not a very straightforward question, but I'll try my best. So yeah, I mean, Oxford, I think, tends to think about these matters in a very implicit way without really articulating it very well, I think, in my view. And it's really our attempt to be much more explicit outside. So, we might be enacting those things without really articulating it very well. That's my interpretation of what we've been doing. So the the Oxford bit is probably because of the brand, if you like, but also because I think that we have the power to move the world in a way that maybe other universities and other brands may not be able to do. I'm hoping that, by hearing Oxford, it's not just a parochial little town in the United Kingdom. It is about a highly visible global brand that speaks to all parts of the world. Not least, I think, because of the colonial links, but because of other kinds of, actions that the university in different disciplines, not just in a business school context. Business schools new, so have done for centuries. As a business school, we are very minded to think about impact. Not only social impact, but impact in all kinds of ways. So we want businesses to be impactful. We want our academic faculties, teaching and research to be impactful in the sense that it actually influences the results. We want to think of ourselves as researchers and teachers who give you some insights, but also some opening up your mind to thinking and seeing the world in a way that you have not done so before. You may not take it up as part of your action, but at least, if you are open-minded to rigorously think about alternative perspectives from the one that you're used to. I mean, I think Brexit was a very good example that one year that dominated the conversation around what Brexit meant for different people. And it meant 100 million different things to different people. And, to really get into the shoes of people who don't necessarily share your views, I think is that at least the beginning of thinking about how to come to a resolution around what the purpose of businesses in society at large. So we're having internal debates about these things. And as a business school, we want to kind of think of not only the purpose of business, but the purpose of business schools in the world. So, in a sense, it's sort of, an old hat. It's been going on for some years, but in another sense, I think it's still early days in terms of having a firm ground on exactly what it is that we think we are doing in terms of purposeful impact. But I hope that that gave you some notion of what the debate is about and what we hope we are doing, which is to open up the minds of business leaders, current and future, to think about the world in a different way so that we can actually come to address and resolve very complex issues which require multiple stakeholders to collaborate, at least, to have a conversation.
Hopefully it's clear to everybody listening that this is a program that has is an long running, but also very adaptable. And you've already mentioned how the conversation has been dominated year on year by the latest issue affecting global business. What do you think is the best reason to join the program in 2023 based on the biggest issues affecting the world, maybe businesses in different parts of the world? Why is 2023 the perfect year, or indeed a very good year, to join this diploma?
Well, I think issues evolve and, arise and disappear, but I guess it's a good year because at least the issues around COVID-19 and the lockdown are hopefully going to, be, it's not going to disappear, but it's going to be one of several issues that we will be addressing. Things like remote working and the impact of that on businesses, it will continue, as a subject matter for debate. But I think that'll be one of several different issues. The other thing about obviously the end of COVID-19 lockdown is that we can go back to face-to-face, and this is very much something that we look forward to. We are nearly there, but not quite. But with your cohort, we'll be going face-to-face, and this is maybe an opportunity to say something about the difference between online program and what we think we're hoping to achieve. I think an online program is great, particularly if you're acquiring some set of skills and techniques, which have the right answer or the wrong answer. I think I'm just thinking about, like engineering or more sort of mathematically based, data science type programs. But for a subject matter like global business, where, as I said up front, you need not only analysis and diagnosis based on data, but also, importantly, judgment and emotional intelligence. Typically, there is no right answer, or typically there is more than one right answer. And with that, we just need a lot of debate and face-to-face interaction, not only looking at what people say, but what non-verbal cues are telling you, and all that kind of thing. So much more difficult virtually, and hopefully in a classroom discussion, we'll get that entirety of what you need to take in to be able to make that judgment and to learn that, to make that your habit as well. So we'll be fully back to that mode in 2023.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. Reiterating again our excitement that we are returning to full in-person delivery. If you were to join this course, there's a building pictured behind myself and Mari on our Zoom backgrounds. This is the extraordinary home of the Side Business School in Oxford, next to the station. And we're looking forward to welcoming many of you to this building. I know, though, that there are many people on this call, prospective applicants, people that may hold offers, who are nervous about coming to Oxford. They'll be traveling on their own. They'll be meeting a cohort of strangers. And so from your experience meeting over 12 different cohorts, what is done to make sure that the cohort hit the ground running? How do you see the relationships that they build, and what do you do to harness the positive discussions and good relationships in the class?
Yeah. I think in a way, I'm just a facilitator, but also play a very minor role. It is really amazing. Every year individuals arrive and it feels like the first day at school when nobody knows each other. And I ask you each to introduce yourselves and get to know each other. But by lunchtime on the first day, there are signs and signals of, at the minimum, friendship, if not conversations around, business links and other things going on. Then by the end of that module, I think the network of, people who are going to continue to work together, but also want to know each other in terms of, just work and other things is there. Sort of amazing amount of energy and incentives around, wanting to get to know each other. So there's absolutely no question that every year is sort of different, but every year, by day one, by the end of day one, if not, by the end of module one, everybody seems to know each other, fairly well. And as a result, when you leave Oxford after visiting the first time, we've been WhatsApp group, there'll be study groups, geographically based most of the time. So there's always one in London. In many years, there's been one in Dubai, and maybe another one somewhere in North America. And you will be basically, reviewing materials together. You'll be debating amongst yourselves. You'll be revising for an assignment together, and then you'll be basically helping each other in, sometimes it's more of a kind of mentor-mentee kind of relationship, because the age range, of course, also is quite diverse, and some people feel that they are senior enough to be able to mentor people within the class. So a lot of mutual help and a lot of mutual learning that happens, and that is an asset that you will take away with you, even after graduation. And it requires absolutely no encouragement, as far as I can see, every year. I mean, I'm not part of the WhatsApp group, and I have no idea what gets said in those, but it is an intense relationship that seems to evolve, that is lifelong. And I'm in touch with many ex-students who sometimes come and actually, share their experiences. As it happened in October, we did that. And so it's a kind of lifelong alumni network that you'll join, not just from within your class, I should say, but, over the years, you can get to know the other cohorts as well. And importantly, I should also mention here that we're just one of a number of diplomas, and sometimes we have shared activities, shared dinners, shared drink receptions, and so you'll get to know the diploma students on the other diplomas, and I think that's also an asset as well. So.
Absolutely. I've seen a couple of participants raising their hand. If you could put your questions into the Q&A rather than us approaching you for those questions, that would be much more helpful. So thank you. Please put your questions in the Q&A. I'm going to slightly take a bit of a sidetrack to answer a couple of questions we've had, which is comparing the diploma with the MBA, and I assume the executive MBA. One is, what is the difference between taking this diploma and taking the executive MBA? And the other is, why would you take this diploma instead of the executive MBA? So perhaps you could just provide a bit of context about the difference between the two programs and how they complement each other, and help somebody deciding between the two which one's best to take.
Yeah, so every year, this particular diploma have had, a handful of people who wanted to go on to the executive MBA, and every year there is, of that, maybe 2 people who would go on to do the executive MBA. So talking to those people concretely, my understanding of starting not directly with the executive MBA, but having the diploma first and going on to the executive MBA is that, you get a feel for what the Oxford class, norm is about. Executive MBA is bigger in classroom size as well. You also get a feel for the classroom with a smaller and therefore maybe a cozier atmosphere than if you went straight onto the executive MBA. The other thing that you should be really aware of is the demand on your time. So depending, everybody will be, fully employed, whether you go into the diploma of the executive MBA in most cases, not all, but most cases, right? So the diploma in global business is obviously dispersed across just 4 modules across the 12-month period. Whereas with the executive MBA, it will be, I think, about double that intensity. All right. So you do need to come to Oxford at twice the speed as on the diploma. And again, easing your kind of familiarization process with the diploma so that you know what it's like, and then you can, double up when you get onto the executive MBA. Might be a sort of gentler introduction to what this is about than going straight onto the executive MBA. But it's very much what you want to do. And, if you want to, just focus on global business area first and foremost, and then get exemption when you go into the executive MBA, that's one route. Obviously, you get the same education as part of a much bigger, more general education on the executive MBA. But yeah, I think it's classroom size, intensity of, the frequency with which you got to come onto the Oxford module, balanced up against demands on your time with your full-time work, I think are the important considerations in my view.
Yeah, okay. Mari, you mentioned the pathway there between our diplomas and the executive MBA, and it's well trodden. 1 or 2 diploma students each year from our various diplomas will then go on to study the executive MBA. If people are interested in that pathway, please contact me after this event. I would be very happy to provide more information. As well, you mentioned in the answer to your last question how you start at Oxford side with your diploma, but it doesn't end when the diploma finishes. You're starting a lifelong relationship with your peers, but also with the business school. And afterwards, if you contact me, I'd be very happy to share some more information about the OBA, the Oxford Business Alumni Network, which you'll become a part of. They have chapters around the world, various events, LinkedIn groups, and so on. So please get in touch. Somebody has asked in the Q&A, they mentioned there's a class size of 40. What is the most important criteria for admissions? What are we looking for in those 40 people? I mentioned the basic requirements to commence your application, but Mari, what are you looking for? I mean, it's a tricky question to answer because we've spoken about diversity. Really what we're looking for is lots of different things. But for somebody who's considering starting an application, what are the key ingredients to a successful applicant, do you think?
Joe, I think you probably know more than I do about that, but let me have a go at it and pass it back to you. Yeah, so I think it's important to say that, 40, and therefore we are going to obviously compare you up against other applicants. But having said that, what we're looking for in everybody, I think, is, firstly, some notion of, the ability to be able to be part of our Oxford standard rigorous, conversation around, practice and policy. And that could be indicated by a combination of your academic records and your work experience and what your references say about that. So it's really about your personal qualities around a combination of, being able to be engaged in the kind of diagnosis, judgment, and emotional intelligence, the kind of three things that I keep on mentioning. So that's one. The other thing that I think is probably important, not least as a kind of selection criterion for your kind of decision about when to apply and when is the right time to do this program, right? And so, as I implied, the age range of the applicants are quite broad, as is the final and accepted class profile. But having said that, sometimes some people have too little experience, and other times maybe people have too much experience. The latter is very rare, but we do make a decision on, the leveling the playing field in some way, so that as a class we have a good body of, people who can relate to each other in some way. And so, if you think that, you have the right level of experience, and in that kind of what the right level is, in many cases, it is about, wanting to stay in the same organization. Maybe you're a functional specialist, like your lawyer or your finance person, or you're even like an R&D scientist or a medic, and you want to kind of make a transition in your career to something else which is related but broader, and or related and much higher up, to board level. That kind of career transition is a good flag for thinking, what is it that we can contribute in the diploma to making that transition a really viable and a feasible, realistic one. I hope that helps.
I think so. I was thinking what I would add to that, and there's really not much that I would add, but my experience of speaking to every potential applicant is that the successful applicants are those that at the point of speaking to me to find out more, they already had an understanding of what they would bring to the classroom from their experience, but what the diploma would give to them and how it would help them in their career. Perhaps it would help them with a particular goal that they have, or their industry, their business, to better their understanding. If you can answer those two questions at the point of applying, I think it will be a strong application, I think. There are less experienced and more experienced people in the class. So don't disregard yourself if you feel at your either end of the spectrum. As long as you have, 5-6 years of relevant experience, a good degree behind you, you're ready to consider applying to this program. We have time for one or two more questions if people want to continue to ask them. But in the meantime, Mari, I wonder, do you have a favorite part of the program or a part of the program that you feel is particularly impactful or has continued to have an impact over the last decade?
Those are two separate questions, I think, impactful and favorite. But I mean, every part is quite interesting and exciting. And what's exciting from my perspective is that, having done it 12 times, every time is different. And not least because of you, I think, in the classroom. And that makes it really fun, in my view. So, whilst we have topics to impart and teach, how it turns out sometimes is quite different. And so that is just throughout, I think. And in terms of my favorite, I think, initially it's a little bit sort of facilitating people to get to know each other. But, by about module 3, everybody's gelled very well. We can really kind of concentrate on the content of what we're imparting. And this is the corporate diplomacy module, by the way. And it's also my favorite because I think I've really spent a lot of time thinking about how best to just design the classes and the content in a way that resonates with various practitioners as much as people who are in the classroom. It's in many areas there are business practitioners who know that they're good or absolutely fantastic at doing certain things, but they cannot articulate why or what they're doing and why it is that it's great. And corporate diplomacy is one of these areas where I think that is happening still. And so we, in an educational institution, if you're in government affairs, corporate affairs, or, CEO's office, who are in the business of what I call like an influencing game. So this is beyond lobbying to kind of really understand, but also shape the debate in policy. A lot of people are good at doing it because they know the right people at the right time. Exactly the content of what they're discussing and how they do the influencing is not very well articulated. We're trying to do that. So with that, I think that's an exciting area. And Oxford is also wonderful in June. So the weather-wise, it's as you know, if you're from hot countries or from California, most of the time, I'm from Japan, by the way. So Oxford weather is not very nice, but in June it can be wonderful, sunny and wonderful. We can do just go punting or having a glass of something in the college lawn, and days are long, it doesn't get dark till nearly 10, and so everything gels to being a lovely experience in my view.
Absolutely. I would advocate for that. But I think that what's great about the modules being spread throughout the year is that you experience the 4 seasons of Oxford. And many people that are from exclusively hot parts of the country, I feel that they miss out on the beauty of seasonality. So, but without wanting to turn this into a tourist board presentation for Oxford. As people are considering various different diplomas, I ran an event earlier in the year about the Oxford experience. So outside of the classroom as well as inside. And I gave basically my perspective on what I think makes Oxford unique and what it is. Why would you choose to study in Oxford because of where it is? Do you have a perspective as a member of faculty at this famous university that you think makes it stand out, that you would share with somebody considering us versus another business school? Perhaps also, a business school outside of the UK as well. Why would you come to the UK? Why would you study in Oxford?
I can be very British and say, of course, it's the best, and that's it. But and by the way, I was an undergraduate at Oxford as well, so I've never thought about articulating what that is, and I think it helps for me to go away and then come to Oxford after months of being away to realize just the kind of atmosphere and the norm of what Oxford experience is about, and I can see that is to do with the it's the people who are here. I think the ways in which we converse with very open, extremely collegial, extremely polite and disagreeing with each other, but we do disagree, and a lot of new insights and conversations around political, social, and economic issues that are part of a business school conversation. There's no kind of border between what is business and what is not, partly because of the collegiate system. All that is something that I think I love, and I think that's where it can be a kind of hotbed for new ideas, and hope that that's what makes a good university a really excellent and sustainable place for learning as well, and you'll be part of that. So hopefully that's kind of attractive enough for most of you who want to come and join that conversation, even if it's from time to time, not full time. And I think having that kind of sanity of what it looks like from within as well as from outside Oxford is a very good idea. So yeah.
The certificate looks very impressive on the office wall as well, doesn't it? University of Oxford degree. Wonderful. We are drawing the session to a close, I think, in the next few minutes, unless anybody has any last minute questions. I'm going to share the slides once again, just so you can have my contact details. I've scanned through the names of the people that have attended. Thank you again, everybody, for attending today. And I know that there are a few people who I've already spoken to and others that I haven't spoken to. But as I'm very happy and proud to oversee recruitment for this wonderful course, I would love to talk to you if you're interested in applying. So please go onto our website, download a brochure, submit your CV, and set up a call with me. There's my email address and my phone number, the phone that I'm sat next to and I'm expecting to ring off the hook as soon as this webinar ends. Please contact me, get in touch. I would love to tell you more about your suitability for the programme, answer any questions you haven't had the chance to have answered. But thank you very much to everybody for attending. We hope very much to be welcoming you to Oxford in January, and there is plenty of time still to apply. The final deadline is the 5th of December, and we're not even in November yet, so lots of time for you to apply, and we would encourage you to contact us. Mari, do you have any closing remarks as we draw to a close?
Oh, just to say thank you for listening in, but also really hope that we'll see many of you applying and being in Oxford. So
wonderful. Once again, thank you very much to everyone, extending our best wishes from autumnal Oxford outward to wherever you are in the world. Please get in touch for more information, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you very much.